clear to you, Prof.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Institute of Chinese Studies, I extend a warm welcome to all to the special panel discussion on celebrating 10 years of the ICS-HYI Multi-Year Doctoral Fellowship in China Studies. This fellowship commenced in 2014 and marked its decadal milestone in 2024. This prestigious fellowship program was established to support and train the next generation of China scholars in India. Over the past decade, 20 fellowships have been awarded, making it one of the most sought-after opportunities in the field. Its unique structure allows fellows to engage with some of the brightest minds and cutting-edge resources in Chinese universities, followed by a year of mentorship under leading scholars and academics at Harvard. This panel discussion will highlight the achievements of the ICS-HYI Fellowship Program and offer an excellent opportunity for prospective candidates to interact with both current and former fellows. We are privileged to have scholars and professionals, each at different stages of their academic and professional journeys, representing various cohorts and different institutions. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Veda Vaidyanathan, Mr. Pavan Amin, Ms. Shubda Gurung, Mr. Nishant Sharma, and Ms. Cherry Hitkari. Dr. Veda Vaidyanathan is an Associate Fellow at the Center for Social and Economic Progress in New Delhi. She was the inaugural recipient of the ICS-HYI Fellowship in India. Mr. Pavan Amin is a doctoral scholar at the Center for East Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is presently a visiting fellow at the Harvard-Yenching Institute. Ms. Shubda Gurung is a doctoral scholar at the Center for Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and is presently based at the Harvard-Yenching Institute. Mr. Nishant Sharma is a doctoral scholar at O.P. Jindal Global University and is currently conducting research at Fudan University as an exchange scholar. Ms. Cherry Hitkari is a doctoral scholar at the Department of East Asian Studies, Delhi University. She is currently studying Chinese language at the East China Normal University, Shanghai. During the discussion, fellows will share their experiences and insights and reflect on the impact of the fellowship on their academic and professional journeys. We are honored to have with us today a distinguished panel of experts who have played pivotal roles in the conceptualization and success of this fellowship. Professor Alka Acharya, Director of the Institute of Chinese Studies and Professor and Chairperson of the Center for East Asian Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, will deliver the introductory remarks. Mr. Ravi Bhutalingam, Emeritus Fellow at the ICS and Fellow at Royal Geographical Society London, will moderate today's session. Dr. Madhvi Thampi, who is an Honorary Fellow at the ICS, former editor of China Report, and former Associate Professor at Department of East Asian Studies, Delhi University, will deliver the closing remarks, weaving together the essence of today's discussion into a thoughtful and inspiring conclusion. Let us dive into what promises to be an engaging conversation. Before I hand it over to Professor Alka Acharya, I would like to request all the participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the session. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may use the raise hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. Thank you. I shall now request Professor Alka Acharya to deliver the introductory remarks. Over to you, Professor Acharya.
Thank you, Snigdha, and a very, very warm welcome to one and all. Snigdha has laid the ground for starting what she has aptly described as one of the most exciting discussions. Exciting in the sense that we are going to discuss an opportunity that has come our way, and through us, our ability to be able to offer to young scholars in Indian universities working on China or China related research areas, or even topics which have a China focus in some sense. Uh, and this is really proving to be a tremendous shot in the arm in terms of what we have set out as our mission to nurture, foster, and promote the next generation of scholarship in on China in India. When Professor Liz Berry contacted the institute in 2013 and laid before us this proposition for initiating a scholarship, a multi-year doctoral fellowship in collaboration with the Harvard-Yenching, it was literally like a miracle was unfolding before us. What was clear was that they wanted to locate it within an institute which had the flexibility to move across institutions, across organizations, to be able to spread our net far and wide, and yet be uh, anchored in a network of universities to be able to then therefore spread this, increase our catchment area, our pool, from where we would draw upon young scholars studying China. And at that particular point of time, of course, while India China relations were going through a fairly positive phase, I would say, universities were not in a position to offer extended field work to students. Language issues were galore. Many universities which had students working on China did not have the wherewithal to offer them opportunities to build language capabilities. And so this scholarship, multi-year fellowship, comes as literally a kind of manna from heaven. And thereafter, we began this journey by which we selected two scholars every year. And at the other level, what this scholarship, what this collaboration with Harvard-Yenching offered us was strong institutional backing from both India, China, and supported by the Harvard-Yenching to send our scholars to some of the best universities and some of the best institutions, and more specifically to those institutions which specialized in the kind of research that the scholars. So, in other words, Harvard Yenching helped us literally tailor make the institution which our scholars went to, put them in touch with the best possible experts and resource persons, something which was quite outside the ken of young researchers who were just setting out on their own. And so, this strong institutional organizational support kickstarted the process by which we start to expand uh, our, uh, our search for scholars who would benefit from this and consequently benefit the growth and development of China studies in India. The other thing that I would like to flag out specifically here is that at a time when funding was going a bit low, since this is a collaborative exercise, ICS is also putting in about uh, half the resources that are required for this multi-year fellowship. At a time when we were running a bit low on funds, we come across yet another miracle, and that was in the shape of the Gargi and Vidya Prakash Dutt Foundation, which stepped in to help us to continue this effort to support the scholars who were who would be getting this fellowship. Now, obviously, as we go along, you will get to know exactly how this scholarship is structured, organized, and how it pans out over the next 4 years. But the specific gratitude that I would like to express on behalf of the Institute to the Gargi and Vidya Prakash Dutt Foundation for supporting now this fellowship which has, as was pointed out to you earlier, benefited 20 young scholars who are easily going to be the proudest feathers that we will wear in the ICS cap. So, with those words, and with once again welcoming you to this session, and I hope that this interaction and discussion will be the spark that will light 1,000 other sparks which will be interested and who will look at this scholarship as a great opportunity and come in and apply for it. So thank you all very much. And with those words, I will turn the charge over to Ravi.
Thank you, Alka. That was a succinct and very fine introduction to what is, in fact, a very remarkable fellowship in the landscape, in the total landscape of Indian education, I would say, not just in China studies. It is really a remarkable product, and you briefly outlined its history. And this is why we are keen to get this message across to as many students interested in the area of China studies as possible. There are a number of details of the fellowship which are in the link. FAQ, frequently asked questions, items in the link that has been sent to everybody. May I request, Snigdha, if you haven't put it up on the chat box, it may be wise to put it there so that people can refresh their memories, new entrants can have a look at it. That gives you all the logistics, all the details of the fellowship. Now, to give you a flavor of what exactly this fellowship involves, the experiences of those who have been through it, what they learned, what were the ups, what were some of the challenges, and what are the prospects. We have our 5 fellows here. They've already been introduced, so I won't repeat that. But they represent actually the full range of the fellowship, right from the start, where you start learning the Chinese language. And I think you are there at that stage, Cherry, right? And then you have Nishant, who's also in China doing research in China. And then at the next stage, you have 2 of our scholars. You have Pavan and you have Shubda. Both are at the Harvard-Yenching Institute doing their part of research in their respective projects. And then there is Veda, who has completed this marathon very successfully. In fact, she was the one of the inaugural fellows of this entire program, and she is now in the stage of working in a very prestigious think tank, and she can tell you more about the post fellowship life that this whole process offers you. So between them, I think you will get a very panoramic view of this fellowship. It is very much more than an academic experience. It is a total life experience that I think they will tell you. Now, to help the fellows, and I hope this doesn't confuse it further, what I propose to do is ask each of you 5 fellows 3 questions. I'm going to ask them all at once so that you can cover it in whichever way you think best. You are all at different stages, so some of you may be able to answer one question a little more fully than others. But in total, we would like to hear your experiences. So the 3 questions are as follows. Number 1, what were some of the special learnings and insights that you received from this fellowship, which you would like future entrants to know about? Number two, what makes this fellowship unique and one of its kind? And number three, how did this fellowship enhance your career development, both in academia and otherwise? And what are the prospects as far as jobs and employment is concerned? So, and you can kind of mix and match in these in whichever way you think best. We will have the first round of 5 minutes each. And I will start the clock ticking. It is 4:20 now. So let's start from the earliest phase. I think, Cherry, why don't you kick off?
Sure, sir. Thank you. And thank you, ICS, for having me. It's truly a pleasure. It's truly an honor, actually, to be here with you all. My experience as an ICS-HYI fellow has been absolutely wonderful. It has been 5 months since I started learning Chinese language at the East China Normal University in Shanghai, and it has been of great help actually for my research. So, for instance, I learned some Chinese before joining the fellowship as part of my master's course, but I was very confused about my language proficiency level because I never appeared for the HSK test, and I could, for instance, read newspapers and research articles, but I had to look up the dictionary quite a few times. My spoken was not good enough, but since the very beginning, ICS and HYI have been very, very considerate about my language requirements, about addressing my concerns, which included suggesting the right program for me. And I had the freedom to choose any of the universities that I wanted to attend in China. And they made sure that, since the application process till the whole process of moving to China and living there, that I got the best of the opportunities that were available to me. So that way, and I think that the language program has greatly helped me because within 4 months of attending the classes, I can read quite fluently and also speak in academic and non-academic settings quite comfortably. My experience. In terms of research has also been very enriching. Alka ma'am has already highlighted the importance of this fellowship in terms of the exposure that it provides one studying in India, in China, and the US, which I think is very important as researchers, especially at a time that we live in, which is characterized by heightening US-China tensions. It's very important for us to be there and understand what these societies think about each other. And also, like she mentioned, it's not possible for a large section of students, in terms of affordability. I think the best part about the scholarship is also that it comes with a great stipend, which most other fellowships do not really have. So many a times these are other fellowships are either partially funded, even if they are fully funded, they do not have a stipend. Even if they have a stipend, it's not adequate. But the ICS-HYI fellowship offers a very good stipend, which actually allows one to afford a comfortable lifestyle even at an expensive city like Shanghai. So, for instance, I could invest a fair amount of money in grooming myself as a researcher. I could get membership of different libraries. I could visit a lot of museums and also buy a lot of primary materials that are very important for my research but were not readily available in India. And it also granted me access to some of the most renowned scholars at ECNU. I could interact with students. I could also interact with common Chinese people outside the classroom. And all of the questions that they had for me about daily life in India, or the comments that they had to make about life in Shanghai, all of them were reflective of the values that they hold and their perceptions in general of the times that they live in, which were very, very important for me in understanding how China really works. Before moving to China as part of the scholarship, I thought I understood how China really worked, but it was only after moving there that I realized that many of the perceptions that I had been holding on to were false or not entirely true. So it has been a truly wonderful experience for me.
Thank you, Cherry. You've spoken very cogently, and that too, you've kept to the time limit absolutely to the last second. Great. Now, let me move to Nishant. And Nishant, you can also, while you are giving your little presentation, mention just in a few words what is your research project. And Cherry, you can do this next time you come around, because if you remember, there is a second round where each of you has a chance to add on to what you've said. So over to you, Nishant.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nishant, and if any of you glanced at the banner, you might be curious as to why my title is Senior Advanced Student. Why am I basking in that glory when everyone else is just ICS-HYI fellow? Well, let me clarify. It's just a fancy way of saying that I'm in the second year of my ICS-HYI fellowship at Fudan University. I initially thought they gave me this title just to keep my spirits high after a grueling first language year at Central China Normal University. But then it turns out that it's just an English translation of Gao Che Chin Shusheng, which basically means a senior student, and the title is given to any foreign student who's coming for a specialization in China. And oftentimes I'm also humbled any time that I'm called a Lao Wai, which is an informal way of saying a foreigner, but colloquially it means a layman, a raw hand, or someone who is a novice. Anyways, coming to the important business, let me tell you how I got here and how hard it was. So the first time I heard about this fellowship was in 2018. Dr. Veda and Dr. Bhim had come to Christ University during the AICCS, and I vividly
Oh dear. Nishant, you.
remember every single thing that they said, and that was am I still audible? All right.
No, no, you've come back now.
Yeah. So at the time, all right, all right. So at the time when this AICCS was being held, I had taken up a language course, and my interest in China had started to peak. But still, until I entered my PhD at OP Jindal Global University, I had not taken any more than, I think, not more than one specific course on China. So yes, but then again, I was attending all Wednesday seminars and peeking into China through that, reading books, podcasts, newsletters, and all of that, and trying to increase my understanding. At the time of applying, I was remotely working with ICS, and the assistant director there was motivating every single individual to apply for this fellowship. And I was also given the charge of promoting it. So every time I set out a reminder post, I was reminding myself that I have to lift my standards up and improve myself to apply for this fellowship. Uh, my doctoral topic was around national memory narratives and how it impacts governance and foreign policy in China. And what I had realized is that most people working on subjects related to foreign policy or domestic politics of China are doing it in a very rapporteuring way, collecting information with a little flair of analytical insight. Uh, so from the very beginning, what I understood is that in order for me to get this fellowship on to make my thesis meaningful, I'll have to either have a unique topic or a very unique way of approaching it. So one of the like the maximum amount of time which I spent while writing my synopsis was on methodology, theoretical framework, trying to refine it. And yeah, it's always a work in progress, but luckily I was able to get it. Uh, so yeah, first year I spent in Central China Normal University learning my language. Most of the students there were like 18 to 22-year-old pre-university students learning language, and I got to hear unique perspectives, especially from the Chinese students, because most of their adult lives they had only seen or heard of Xi Jinping, let alone Deng Xiaoping or Hu Yaobang or even Zhao Ziyang. None of them were people that they have heard of. So it was a very interesting perspective to hear from them. Most of the first year went in language training. And also getting to see China, I got to travel and learn a lot passively in that way. Coming again this year to Fudan University, the experience has been wonderful. You get access to great academic resources. Of course, Fudan is one of the best universities here, so all kinds of accesses. For example, I needed a corpus, a reference corpus of Renmin Ribao, People's Dailies texts from 1989, and I was able to apply for it because of my affiliation to Fudan University. So yeah, a lot of access that you otherwise wouldn't get, I got through this fellowship. Most importantly, you learn how to navigate Chinese sources much better after you arrive in China. You get to know how Chinese internet works, what are the softwares that you can use. And like they say, the Westerners say that for any topic on YouTube, there's always an Indian guy explaining it. In China, there's always a Chinese guy selling something on Taobao. And many of the academic softwares, for instance, I wanted to do a semantic prosody analysis and a corpus-based linguistics analysis, and I had to use Python scripts for that. And I have no experience of using Python. So I was able to find a guy on Taobao who created an executionable software for me. So these kind of little things that you get in China, you cannot find it anywhere else. And yeah, in that way, the experience has been wonderful in terms of the resources, the access, and just the enjoying the daily life in China. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishant. You've given a very graphic account, again, right within the time slot. And you have another 3 minutes in the next round. So we'll come back to you in due course. So now to go to the experience at Harvard-Yenching, let me call upon Shubda to be our next presenter.
Hello, everybody. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really nice to be presenting today because it's the 10 years of like Harvard-Yenching ICS Fellowship. But I'd like to begin by just explaining the process of when I received it and how I went about going to Peking University and now Harvard-Yenching Institute. So I basically received the fellowship back in 2020, right before the pandemic started. But after we received it in March 2020, but we were supposed to travel to China for different purposes. Some people were going for language, but I had opted out not to learn the language because my background during my bachelor's and master's has been language and literature and cultural studies. So I had opted for like 2 years of the fellowship, 1 year in Peking University and the second year in Harvard. So because of the pandemic, I had to defer it for 2 years, which was like 2021 and 2022. But then the third year, I had to defer it again because of some personal reasons, family health issues. So I could finally go to China in 2023, 2024 academic year. I was based in Peking University, and then now I'm at Harvard. But basically, one thing I would like to highlight is like the flexibility and the consideration that both ICS and HYI showed during the time of the pandemic, and also the deferment of my of like the personal reasons that I had to defer the fellowship. They had been considerate of that, which I feel is something that most of the fellowships do not do that. Having said that, so in 2023, I went to Peking University as a senior visiting fellow. So before mentioning that, like I'd like to mention that my topic is I'm working on India-China cultural relations, specifically looking in the works of Professor Qi Xianlin. And as many of you know, that Professor Qi Xianlin was a professor at Peking University for a very long time. And he was also the pioneer of like India studies in China, and the department that he established was the School of like Foreign Languages. So through the fellowship, I got the opportunity to not only like be in Peking University, but be in the department that he kind of established. And although he passed in 2009, but then his students, like Professor Wang Pangwei, also had retired by the time I went to Peking University. In fact, he just retired like a semester before I went in 2023. But his students, like the third generation of, sort of like India scholars in China. So I was able to interact with them. In fact, one of the Professor Chen Ming, was sort of like my informal guide, and he told me like what all sources I could access and who all people I could meet, and so that way it was mostly for me resource collection and also sources that I needed to actually work on my thesis, and also interviewing people who actually personally knew Professor Chi Xianlin when he was alive. Apart from that, there were also like workshops that were held. There was a workshop that was held specifically on Ji Xianlin, and in the same department that I was there. So I took part in the workshop, and then there was a conference on Tagore, which was in the May of 2024, which was celebrating like the 100-year anniversary of Tagore's visit to China. I participated in that. That was in tandem with NYU Shanghai and Peking University. So there were like these opportunities that I was able to participate because I was there because of the fellowship. And now at Harvard, I mean, the amount of resources that are available over here is something that I did not expect. And especially like the library access, because I mean, Widener is one of the biggest library that is here. But apart from that, there's of course like the Harvard-Yenching library that has like the uh, largest East Asia collection and rare books collection in probably the entire world. Uh, but which has been very helpful. There are a number of libraries that you can access. You don't have to stick to just Harvard-Yenching library. But they also have like some online resources, like they have the Borrow Direct. So even if, like, let's say a book that you need is not available in Harvard, so they have access with other Ivy League universities that they can like get the book for you from other Ivy League university and deliver it to you to a specific library in Harvard that is closer to you so that you can access it as well. There's another service which is kind of like scan chapters from a book. If you want to access a particular chapter from a book, they can scan it and deliver it within like 1 working day or like 2 working days, which has been like very helpful for my research. And also like there is a buy option. Like if there is a book that is not available anywhere in Harvard system, so you can actually place a purchase order with the librarian, and the librarians are like super helpful. They are basically, you can actually talk to them through chatbot at whenever, whatever time you want to, and they actually follow back to kind of like ask that, whether you have received the book or if you not received the book, which I think is really great. And on top of that,
you can just watch your time. Of course, you have another slot later on. Okay.
yeah, I'm just going to conclude just by saying
Okay, sure.
my experience within HYI. So right now it was Harvard overall, but within HYI, like this year we have about like 7 ICS fellows with us in Harvard. And there is one China scholar who is doing research on India. So HYI has conducted this workshop, which is like China-India Studies workshop, in which we are supposed to present and also present what we have worked so far, and also get comments from the other participants in the workshop, and also our informal sort of like the mentor. In my case is Professor Tansen. So he was present to sort of like give us comments and like guide us as to how can we improve our work, which I think was one of the advantages that I felt like I wouldn't have gotten if I didn't get the fellowship. So I think for now I just highlighted a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Shabda. Thank you very much. You have another slot coming, so don't worry. Okay, right. So let me move on now to Pawan, also at Harvard-Yenching.
Hi, greeting everyone. It's great to see everyone here. Me and Shubda joining from Cambridge. It's a bone-chilling -13 over here, but it's certainly been a great year. So our experience is probably a little different from other fellows because we got the good news from ICS literally the week the pandemic reached our doorsteps. So we had to wait for 2 years before we could start the program. And through those 2 years, both ICS and HYI kept in touch with us. They checked up on our research. I remember so many meetings where Professor Acharya or Ambassador Kanta would make sure that we are still working on our topics. It just helped to know that we were not forgotten because it was such a long wait. Dr. Lee Rohong, who is the assistant director here at HYI, she helped us apply to universities every year, although the visas were not being issued from China. She also helped us join online language classes in Peking University while we were waiting. So the reason I'm bringing all of this up is because both the Institute of Chinese Studies and the Harvard-Yenching Institute are very invested in this program. They want to ensure that you get all the tools you need to become a good sinologist, if not someone who could talk who can have an educated conversation about China, which goes beyond maybe the opinion pieces in newspapers. I'm sure that was probably something that Professor Acharya and Professor Elizabeth Perry had in mind when they were designing this program. Because for a country that needs like an army of minds that not just guides policy, but also teaches India about China, I think we are still very deficient as compared to any other neighboring country of China, which has a complicated relationship with China. For me, one of the takeaways was my topic in my research is to do with China and the United Nations. I look at how China shapes global discourses through United Nations. But what I learned is if you are in sinology, you need to go beyond international relations. You need to be someone who understands the domestic politics, economics, history, what have you. Because if not, then you end up just borrowing or echoing the scholarship of other people. And I think you won't be able to contribute anything new. Um, this For us, the language training, I went to Shifan Tashwe in Taipei, which is NTNU in 2022, but that was only because it was a stopgap arrangement during the pandemic. Any recipient here on would probably go to China, Wuhan, or ECNU. I'm sure Cherry and Nishant would talk more about that. But um, both the institutes focus a lot on ensuring that we have a very sound grounding in Chinese language. It was very rigorous in Taipei. I got a chance to continue that in Futan, and in over here, Harvard gives us additional funding to continue learning Chinese. But I'm also getting a chance to learn classical Chinese here in Harvard University, which is 1Yan1. It's a language of antiquity, which you need if you want to read old Chinese poems or read Chinese philosophies of Mencius or Confucius. So it helped that I went to Taipei in a way because I'd already studied Fang Tizi, which is the traditional Chinese character. So it made my life a lot easier over here. I can't underscore, I mean, I can't emphasize how important it is to learn Chinese. I mean, for example, if a Chinese scholar writes on India using only Chinese sources, we won't read that book, right? I think it's the same for anybody who is dealing with China. No matter if you're a scholar or a journalist or an analyst, I think you need to be able to engage with Chinese literature, especially for young entrants like us who are just entering the field. Any material that we send to a publisher or an editor, they would probably turn to the bibliography page and see how many Chinese sources have been used in this. So that's something which has helped a lot for me personally in this fellowship. And for me, another takeaway has been an opportunity to network and make friendships and connections with grad students, with young professors in Taiwan, in China, and over here now in Harvard. Um, it's just made me more curious about China. Like I would want to talk to, say, a postdoc who's looking at constitutional law in China, and I'd also love to talk to a young professor writing a book on, say, the rituals of the E ethnic group in South China, because you never know where the next idea or next inspiration comes from. So my advisor in China, for example, was Professor Chen Guangyao. He's from the history department at Futan University, where Nishant is right now. So he's more famous for his works on cultural revolution, but after meeting him, I realized that in his earlier days, he had written a lot on China and the League of Nations. He was very instrumental in helping me frame the background of my topic, or at least the first chapters. Then we also have the UN Studies Department in Bhutan, where you have um, so many just great minds working on China and the UN. You get access to resources which you would not get outside China. But more importantly, if you're looking at China and the UN, you would want to have a Chinese perspective. So yeah, I mean, I think this for me, these three things, the language, the networking, and just the ability to step outside my comfort zone of international relations and engage with other disciplines which need a better knowledge of Chinese language was probably something that I will carry with me forever. But I'll cede my time and maybe I can go into more detail in the next round. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Pavan. That was a very, very eloquent presentation. Well done. Now let me come to our fifth panelist, Veda. Over to you, Veda.
Thank you, Ravi. It's so wonderful to be here. ICS-HYI panel is always a homecoming. I am nervous though this time for two reasons. One, I feel like Ravi has had something to say after everyone's presentation, so I feel like we're being graded for how well we do. Like there are questions, how are your answers doing, and also the time. So I'm going to try and be as brief as possible. And there are two things I want to talk about ICS-HYI, and given that it's literally a decade ago, I don't know how relevant it'll be. Which I should also mention, it's great to listen to everyone and see and just learn how much the program has grown. It's so wonderful. It's really, really encouraging. So two things I want to talk about. One is platform and one is perspective, right? And how the ICS-HYI has sort of spoken to both for me. Perspective, both in terms of in personally as well as professionally. Professionally, because as a young scholar, as a young PhD, you're going in with this big abstract question that you have, right? You're not really sure what you want to do with it. You have all of these resources, and then you go into this program, and then you suddenly have access to all of these things, which are so diverse. You go from a university in India with X amount of resources or perspectives or professors, and then you go to China, which is so different. The same way you look at that question is so different. And then you go to Harvard, again, substantial amount of resources in a very different way thrown at you. So suddenly you have to contend with asking the same question in completely different ecosystems, right? And I feel like that's a very unique, specific challenge to folks who do this fellowship. And I think it's an incredible learning curve. It's challenging. I mean, it's a logistical challenge. In many ways, it's a challenge. But I think it really helps sort of hone your perspective on how you see your subject and how you see your question. Now, to get into the specifics of it, unlike a lot of you here, I don't come from China studies. And this sort of goes to show how wide the net cast for this fellowship is, right? Because I come from African studies and I'm looking at Indian and Chinese engagement in this huge continent. So now again, I'm sitting at the middle. And I was telling Arvind this yesterday when I was speaking to him. In the China studies community, I feel like I'm on the fringes because I'm from African studies. In the African studies community, my 5-year PhD was funded by Asian studies, so I'm on the fringes there as well. But it's a good place to be, right? And the sense that I have 10 years hence, when I look at other scholars, when I look at other colleagues, is the idea that the way that I've asked a question, right, that has been shaped fundamentally by this fellowship. Just to give you a perspective, going from African studies in Mumbai University to Professor Lian Shan's course at Peking University, and he's listening to Herwen Ping and him talk about Africa and just seeing how dynamic the Africa Studies Center at Peking University was. Forget everything else, just the amount of resources they were pushing to understand the geography really sort of made you sort of look at this question a little differently. Right. And then from there, you go to Sleepy Harvard, where conversations on Africa are pretty colonial. And you're like, hang on a second, how are the Chinese having a completely different conversation that the Indians and the Americans are missing, right? So it's you suddenly forced to look at this question from such different perspectives. And on a personal level, what happens is a question of growth, right? Because again, you're not in a comfort zone for 5 years. You were asked to pick up, move in 10 days, make a home for yourself in a new place, make a new bank account, make new friends, make new setups, figure out where to get food, figure out the library, become friends with the librarian, all of that in a matter of 20 days, because in 10 months, you're on the move again. Right. So I think that sort of brings you, makes you pick up and be dynamic and very entrepreneurial in a way, perhaps that if you were in a university for 5 years, you wouldn't have to be. And the second point I wanted to talk about was about platform. For someone from a little town in Kerala and Wayanad to have the audacity to apply to a Harvard-Yenching Fellowship, to actually get that fellowship, to actually do it successfully. And then many years later, when the Princeton postdoc application came, the imposter syndrome was not in the room, right? Because you had actually been in rooms with these intellectual greats. You had been in these workshops at HYI. I don't know if they still have it. We used to have these wonderful weekly workshops at HYI. Harvard used to have this workshop where Boston University, MIT, and Harvard grads would get together and discuss their research. In Peking University, we had similar political science workshops where we would get together and discuss ideas. So you'd been in rooms, you had articulated your ideas, you had picked a vocabulary from other ecosystems, you were able to talk to people who had no clue about your context and quickly, very succinctly tell them what it is that you were trying to do, right? So I think a sense of confidence, a sense of intellectual security that perhaps maybe especially women don't initially have a lot of, sort of all of those things fell into place with this fellowship. So in terms of platform, in terms of bringing you to the spotlight in a way, right? Here we are, 20 people, 10 years later, in this excellent, incredible fellowship. The spotlight is on you already, right? So to sort of, then the question is, what do you do with the spotlight? And I think that's where the career question comes in. And I don't want to get into the nitty-gritties of what the job market is like. It's not great. What do? We have to be entrepreneurial, right? That's not the question. But the point I'm trying to say is all of the skills we pick up, picking up from India, going to China, doing all of this in 10 months, for you guys, another year in China, and then at Harvard, and you come back, the skills that you pick up of having to be, like I mentioned, entrepreneurial, creating something, coming up with an idea, all of those things are first tested out in this fellowship. Just to give you a real world example, when I came back to India from Princeton, there was no job here at CSEP, right? But entrepreneur, real Harvard HYI ICS scholar that I was, I wrote out a vision document for what it is that I want to build at CSEP, which was an Africa initiative, an Asia-Africa initiative that looks at Asian countries and African countries, their engagement and so on. And I just sent it to folks here and said, this is what I want to build. This is the experience that I have. Can I come here and build it? Right? So again, the confidence to do that, the language to do that, the framework of thought about how to align your thought, all of that for me fundamentally came from this fellowship. So I thought then that I was incredibly fortunate. 10 years later, I still think that I was so incredibly fortunate to have been chosen alongside Nirmola for the inaugural batch. So Alka ma'am, you were in the room. Madhavi ma'am, you were in the room. Maybe I think you were also in the room. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Veda. That was again a very, very expressive statement coming from you after a 10-year bird's eye view, as it were, of your journey. Now we move into the next round, which will be 3 minutes each, and this time, please focus on stuff that either you wanted to say but couldn't get around to saying it, or something that you want to comment on what the others have said. And if you don't have too much to say, then it's okay if you stop after a minute or whenever you want to. I just want to highlight some of the very valuable things that have come out of the presentation so far. I think it has shown the fellowship in a much fuller light than the description given in the FAQ. The FAQ, valuable as it is, only gives a bare bones outline, but the experiences you've heard have illustrated things like the nature of the stipend, which allows you to live a fuller life, the flexibility available in the fellowship, which adjusts for all kinds of exigencies, the networking opportunities you get, the different perspectives that you build up, your skills in using the different platforms and resources that are available. And finally, although, as Veda said, the job market is not super great, but still with entrepreneurship and some creativity, you can go very far. Okay, so let's now start in the same order. We start with you, Cherry, 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. So first, I would like to talk about my research topic, which I'm very sorry I missed out at the beginning. So my research mainly looks at the China Dream, but from a new perspective, analyzing China Dream as a tool of cultural governance, a term which gained parties' attention around the third plenum of the 18th Party Congress, and when the party realized that there were too many cultural insecurities, and it was very important for the Chinese to enhance their cultural confidence. And the solution was to, blend Marxism with China's quote unquote excellent traditional culture, which was Confucianism. And then with the China Dream started a whole movement of mass political participation. And I try to analyze it all through propaganda of the China Dream, looking at different sources from posters, short movie, video content, songs, and images. And I agree with Nishant that, living in China uh, gives one access to a plethora of resources, and it helped me in developing my topic further. So, for instance, I could work on a lot of publications to have the drafts are finished to I'm working on, and all of them related broadly to my topic, but also, I could discover more areas that I could work on. So, for instance, one of them deals with how China perceives the Russia-Ukraine war, particularly focused on the political cartoons in the state media, which I had access to after I moved to China, more access to the Chinese internet. Then one looks at debates on the Chinese internet about Orientalism. So there I could find many commentaries about post and new Orientalisms. So one of them looks at that. Then I could find many Chinese netizens talking about the Mao period and how history is being reinterpreted, particularly after the reform and opening of more than 40 years of reform and opening up, how people analyze the Mao era, specifically looking at the inequalities that it has created, and also music and new worker culture, how migrant labor themselves view themselves and how they seek greater agency. So I think, all of this was impossible for me if I did not have access to these many resources and also guidance that I received because of the ICS-HYI Fellowship.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cherry. Right, let's move on to Nishant. Have we lost Nishant?
Hi. So one thing, if I'm audible, everything seems a bit stuck. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I'm working on national memory narratives. You're working on such a topic, education works, and that is something that you perhaps cannot do correctly unless you are in the country. And this is where I saw a stark difference in ways in which India and China differ. In India, you cannot leave your home and walk 10 steps without seeing Modi ji smile at you from some wall on a poster or somewhere. In China, you hardly see Xi Jinping in public places other than in libraries, public bookstores, or such. So you get a sense of understanding how the society is imbuing that political communication that comes through the leadership. And one of the more fascinating ways in which I understood China more was also through classes that I attended, the courses that I took here so far. One on public administration, and there's another one on public opinion in China. Before coming to China, we all have these perceptions that Western media teaches us because it reaches us more easily. And I never thought that I would get to see the professor sharing a Winnie the Pooh Xi Jinping meme in the class, which I really did not expect in the public opinion class. So you get to see how the youth perceive the leadership, how academicians perceive it. But one thing that you get to understand is how they love their system. They may not agree with the leadership aspect all the time. So these nuances you pick up when you are in China. And also, because you're in China, you're placed in, it's just a gateway to East Asia, and it enables you to travel easily to the nearby countries if there are any conferences. For instance, I'm going to Seoul, South Korea for that IPSA World Congress. If I was not here, it would have been really difficult to arrange the funding and go there and do all of that. So when you're here, the networking is great. You can apply for conferences in the nearby countries. The stipend is enough for you to sustain a decent standard of living, and if you're able to save, you can travel. So all of that has been wonderful. And again, lastly, this is something that I cannot emphasize enough. Once you are in China, I think the first thing that you got to do after learning the language and while learning the language is understanding the ecosystem of Chinese internet. Uh, I have come across so many alternatives, softwares like Thulak and many others that have been tremendously helpful, and I had no idea that they exist. And they also don't work without a Chinese IP address, because the Chinese government tries to. The internet is designed in a way that some things don't work without a Chinese IP. Same goes with some party documents that I was able to access, which otherwise are not published in PDF formats. You can just get scanned copies or get your physical copies and get them scanned and then work with that. So yeah, this is what I wanted to share in terms of the perspective I got and the resources and other things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nishant. Right, Shubda, over to you.
Hi. So I think one thing I'd like to add is the freedom that this fellowship gives, not just in terms of the financial freedom, which has been emphasized multiple times, but also the freedom to utilize your time how you want to. Whether it is depends on, like, what stage of the PhD you are at, whether it is you want to audit classes or you want to make connections, or whether you want to collect data or you want to write your dissertation as well. So there, at different stages, people are sort of like approaching their year in China and Harvard. So I think like that freedom that both ICS and HYI provide, there's like not there's no pressure to kind of like do a certain thing. Like you can utilize the time because they trust you with, the time and the money and the resources that they give you to utilize it to the maximum, to the optimum level that you can. So I think like that is one of the wonderful things about this program is the freedom aspect of it, and also like the freedom to travel, like just in terms of like you travel to like three places in like 3 years. Like for example, people have traveled from Taiwan to China and now to Harvard. I think it's uh, one of the the perks of this fellowship. So I think like that is one of the things that I just like to highlight. Yeah.
Thank you, Shubda. Thank you very much. Right, Pawan, next is you.
Okay, so I think your second question was what makes the fellowship unique and one of a kind. For me, that would be two things. One is it helps you break stereotypes around China. Nishant is also in Futan, and probably he could attest to this, because when you are in China or before going to China, you're always told that they would not be so willing to talk to you openly. The professors there won't want to engage with you. But that's absolutely not true. Like I no matter who I met in Futan, right from my language partner who is second year master student in Chinese history, or the senior professors there, they are more than happy to have freewheeling conversations on your topic and unfiltered conversations. Like uh, more importantly, they are more curious to know about India. There is also a professor here at Harvard with us right now from Peking University who actually reads China Report very often, and she keeps telling us that the China scholars in India are better than at their subject than the India scholars in China. So I think it's very important for us in academia to be able to build those bridges. And uh, if not for this fellowship, I don't see how a young entrant in this field can start making those connections where you can engage with people on the other side. And second, just to echo what Dr. Veda was talking about. Like it gives you the audacity to speak your mind in a room of giants, right? Like so, in Harvard, I was attending a lecture which was started by Professor John K. Fairbank on the history of late imperial China. So now it's taught by his students. Now it's being taught by Professor Mark Elliott, who credited with starting Xin Qingshi or New Qing history, and Professor Michael Sioni, who looks at the South China School of Chinese history. I'm not from that background, but just every week we read a different aspect of Chinese history. Some days gender, some days it's environmental history or maritime history. But just having the audacity to challenge Fairbank in a lecture that he started and having these professors commend you for it, I think it just does a lot for your motivation. It's just, I mean, just to give you an anecdote, something fun happened. I was just crossing the road one day in an afternoon, during an afternoon stroll, and I hear somebody saying, "Hey, Pawan, how you doing?" I look up and it's Professor Michael Sioni, sorry, Professor Mark Elliott. And I remember a few years ago, I couldn't afford his book in India because it's not published in India. It's very expensive on Amazon. So I just mumbled something because I was starstruck, and I later sent him an email saying, "I'm sorry for the awkward exchange. It's just that I'm not used to seeing you walking around when I'm taking an afternoon stroll." So he invited me to his office. It was so surprising that he was keen to know more about my research. He gave me a signed copy of his book. And now I'm also, my advisor here is Professor Rana Mittar, who just moved from Oxford to Harvard. These are people you've been reading like for the last 10 years. And now that they know your name, it's just so surreal. Like me and Shubda, we were just walking one day after dinner, and we just happened to pass by Professor Elliott, Professor Sioni, and then Professor Michael Pewitt. And all of them, like in unison, they were like, "Oh, hi, Pawan, how are you? Good evening." It just, yeah, it takes a while to register that these people know you by your first name. So I think, yeah, this fellowship, it helps you make these wonderful connections. And even in Shanghai, like you could it had go beyond your own university, working with the New York University, Shanghai, where you meet, where Professor Tansen Sen is there, who works very closely with Fudan University. It just helps you to make connections not just with Chinese academia, but also others from like Sri Lanka or Pakistan or what have you. Like, and those connections come in handy. Like these are the people I will be going to the Association of Asian Studies with now for a panel. So yeah, none of this would have happened if it was not for the fellowship, and it's been like a waking dream for the last 3 years. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Pawan. I think listening to you and all the others, I think I'm again struck by the range and depth that this experience has provided you. There is far more than the academic aspects, the perspectives revealed, and the new horizons, etc. In so many dimensions, I see different examples of how you are telling us of the way that you have grown in so many ways. Now, before I come to Veda, who will be our final speaker, and then after this, we will move on to questions. Let me remind the audience that the chat box is open, so you can post your question there, or if you prefer, you can use the raise hand option and then ask your question when you're called upon. To clarify, we will go first with the written questions and then with the raised hand question. And Snigdha, if you would be good enough to help out reading the questions so that I can't keep track of both perhaps at the same time. Right. Having said that, Veda, now over to you for the grand finale of this particular round.
Oh, no pressure at all. Grand finale. I think my one tidbit to anyone who's thinking of applying to this, right? You've listened to all of us at different stages of this fellowship, would be this. There's so many different ways that you can make the best of this. Like everyone's talked about the freedom that exists within this fellowship. It truly is. You can make it whatever you want it to be. And one of the things that I'd say is travel as much as you can, right? And make those connections, make those networks. Those are going to last you way beyond the time of this fellowship. A few years ago, I was in Ghana and I wanted to study cassettes. And one of the scholars who worked on Ghana, I'd met him at Chiang Mai many years ago. And I reached out to him and I said, listen, I want to build on the study that you did on Chinese enterprises in Ghana. And he sent me his entire data set from 2007 to 2000, I think 19 or so. And I only had to collect data from 19 onwards, right? So these are professional networks that you're going to keep for a lifetime. So meet people, talk to like-minded people, don't be shy about it, and make the best of this fellowship. So yeah, and also, sorry, last point. And I told this to Pavan when he came to Delhi, that when I went to Harvard and I gave myself a month to sort of settle in, and someone told me about Nancy Hirsch, the librarian, who's now, I know she's retired, but she's an institution in herself. And Professor Deborah Brottingham had written about her in her books and so on. And I went to Nancy and I said, I'm a scholar from India. I look at Africa. I'm going to give it like 2 or 3 weeks, but eventually I'd like to come and see you in the library. And then she said, how about next week, Tuesday, 10:30 or something? And then I go to her library and she's got books stacked up on Africa, like wall to wall, right? And then she helps me carry these books to a little console and she says, I'm going to keep an eye on you. Every time you finish reading a book, keep it on the other side, right? And so I hit the ground running. So it's this wonderful fellowship which is shepherded by incredibly kind, good people, and you have the flexibility to really make of it. So if you are thinking about if you should apply or not, think no further. This is going to be the opportunity of a lifetime. Send in your applications, and we're all here. We're all accessible. If you have any specific questions, bring it up now. If you can't bring it up now, if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to reach out to us later, but definitely send in an application. It's going to change everything, how you do your work. It's going to change who you are as a person, and it's a wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Veda. Now, let's look at what awaits us in the chat box and in the raised hand option. Right. I think people are cogitating. They're probably totally zapped out of their minds on the by this series of presentations by the 5 of you. So while they are thinking about it, I think I'm going to pick on Madhavi. Madhavi, you are a co-progenitor, if that is the right word, of this program along with Alka. And you've been listening to this, and you will, of course, have your final word in the conclusion. But can you kick off the Q&A with something you have on your mind after you've heard everybody?
Well, thank you, Ravi, for giving me this opportunity before my time. But I also was not just the students, but I'm also quite zapped by hearing the all of you making your presentation. It really makes me want to shed about 50 years and go back to being a graduate student or a doctoral student again. I'm really happy that, all of you have, and I'm sure there are others who are not here in this panel today, have benefited so much. While people are thinking of questions, I just, for the sake of putting it all together, I could see there are like 5 things that all of you have said or stressed about this program, and I would put them down as 5 things mainly. One, the language. I mean, no matter how much you learn in India, Chinese you learn in India, you just cannot get that kind of experience, the opportunity to use a language and to upgrade as you can when you go to China for this it's part of this program. The second is access to research materials. As I think it was Nishant who pointed out, there are many things you just can't access even on the internet if you are not there, if you don't have a Chinese IP address. And otherwise, I am a historian. I used to use materials in the library and the archives. And, they are really amazingly organized, the libraries and the archives in China. I'm not even talking about Harvard, in China. And so this is another thing, the access to materials. The third thing is direct experience. I mean, this direct experience, just being in China, for instance, is so important. You rapidly start shedding many preconceptions you have. And I think that's what goes into making a good scholar, because if you just come with a whole lot of formulaic knowledge or preconceptions, you won't make a good scholar. Fourth is the kind of mentoring you get. People have mentioned some of the names of both the Chinese professors as well as the professors in Harvard-Yenching. It's up to you actually, when you go there, how much you get out of this opportunity to get mentorship. It's not just like, you sit there and people will come at you. You have to go and you have to look and go and meet and try. But when you do make that connection with these professors, I mean, it can change your whole way of doing things. And finally, which many of you have mentioned, networking, because after all, I don't think you're students anymore. Or that way, we are all students. We are lifelong students. But I think you are scholars, actually. You're scholars in the making. And so you're not there just to get information and things, but you need to network, meet people, make connections. So, and last, which I haven't mentioned, the sixth, which is equally important, is the stipend. It's a good stipend. I think who mentioned it, Cherry or somebody, that after all, you can't just drink water and study. Just like we couldn't drink water and teach, you have to have something that supports you. So these are some of the things which I got from your panel, and I hope it inspires people who are there, potential applicants who are listening, to apply, because all these things together you won't get from any other fellowship. Thank you, Ravi. I'll stop here for now. If you give me a chance, I have something else to say at the end, but
Thank you, Madhavi. I have a feeling that we will come back to you, but I think your input has certainly triggered one question. So that is the immediate impact that you've had. So that question is from Nimisha Kashyap. And she asks, she's a PhD student from CEAS-JNU. And her question is, what would be your suggestions to people applying for the scholarship? So let me throw it open to the panel. Who would like to go first on this question? Now, Nimisha, I think people may want a little more clarity from you. Firstly, the details, the logistics of the fellowship are available in the FAQ, which has been circulated, and a whole lot of other details are available in the presentations already made. So would you like to make your question a little sharper? Maybe you can raise your hand and ask it.
Or if not, can I just step in? Shubda.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah. Hi, Nimisha. I know, I think in the FAQ, they already mentioned 6 things that you need to sort of submit. But if I remember the time that I was submitting the application, I think what I feel is like the statement of purpose is one of the most important documents that kind of like highlights that how your background kind of aligns with the fellowship and also what you intend to do with the fellowship in the future. So probably one of my suggestion would be like, you can highlight how your background kind of like aligns with the fellowship and what you intend to do, and also how it's going to help you in the future. And if possible, probably just mention the specifics in the sense like if you want to go to a particular university in China, then what is it that you want to do there, who you want to meet, and why that particular university is sort of like important for your research. So at the top of my head, I think like the statement of purpose is one of the kind of like an important document that you can sort of like address and distinguish yourself different from the other applications. Uh, Apart from that, I don't know if anybody would like to say something.
Yes, so I wasn't able to unmute myself. So I was asking, like, what do you think made, what was the specific characteristics of yours or your research that allowed you to get this scholarship? I wanted to know that.
It's not clear, Nimisha. I think.
Yeah, but I think like what she asked was like what are the characteristics of my background sort of like made me to apply for the fellowship. So Nimisha, I was a language student. I did Chinese language and literature in my bachelor's, and then for my master's as well, I did a second master's from Peking University, which was in China studies. And after that, I worked for a bit, for about 2 years before starting my PhD. But before starting my PhD, I knew that this was the topic that I want to work on, and I that's how I sort of like, because I was already based in Peking University, I had heard about Professor Chi Shenlin that was sort of uh, acquainted to me by my professors back in Peking University and also JNU. But reading more about him kind of like made me more interested into his work and the research that he's done on India China. And so that's why I aligned sort of like my experience as a bachelor student, and also in my experience in like my master's personally, that I had experienced back in Peking University, and applied for the fellowship. And with sort of I gave like concrete details as to like I want to be part of a specific department that I have already researched about the people who are part in the department that I'd like to work with, I'd like to meet, I'd like to interview. And I think like that may have helped in my selection. Uh, but uh, but this is just one of the suggestions. It really depends like what your topic is. Maybe you can also do something similar. Maybe mention the specifics in your, statement of purpose.
Thank you, Shubhda. Would Pavan or Cherry or Veda like to add anything to Nimisha's to answer Nimisha?
Just one little thing. One thing that really helped me getting selected in this fellowship was that I applied. And this seems like a stupid thing to say, but many people that when I was promoting it myself, when I was working with ICS, I often used to talk to students and tell them about this fellowship, and many are you feel so surreal about the affiliations and the opportunities. Many people kind of reject themselves in their head before even trying for it. This is something that I would tell students, that unless you aim a little higher and get out of your complacency, you wouldn't be in better places. And struggle in PhD is everywhere. I mean, you could struggle from your room in your home university, or you could struggle at Fudan or Harvard or wherever. It's just the context that changes, and the context makes it more meaningful, and ultimately you as a young academic, you improve. So that is where I think don't reject yourself. Just go for it. Just try. I mean, from personal experience, I'd never thought that I would be studying abroad. Uh, uh, I, I was not from a very wealthy background. I was at one point driving cars after my father's death and doing odd jobs and still, sustaining somehow and getting more education step by step. Uh, and in that aspect, I feel that you need to first make sure that you're improving yourself. There are certain tick marks, right? How to write the SOP. There are certain things that you have to mention. You have to be very particular about the methodology or thematic framework. But more than that, you have to believe in yourself. Just push yourself a bit. And in pursuit of this fellowship, other avenues will definitely open up. You will improve in some ways for you to apply elsewhere. And if you don't get out of your comfort zone and try, then things will never improve. So just try and apply. That is what I would say.
Thank you, Nishant. That's, I think, a very strong message that one has to aim high to really get somewhere, and whatever be the immediate circumstances, I think that message is very important for everyone to hear. Anyone else want to reply on this question to Nimisha?
Yeah, if I can just quickly come in.
Yeah, sure.
To Nimisha and to any other applicant, I think the only prerequisite that there is for application is that your thesis needs to have a very strong China component to it. You could be in a China studies program or a Japanese, Korean, or any other, you could be doing it from management school. The only prerequisite is that it needs to have a strong China component, your PhD. Just to give you an idea, the HY or ICS-HYI cohort is just one, but when one of the many cohorts that come to Harvard every year. So we have people from Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia. There is a scholar from Japan who looks at the architecture of churches. So it doesn't have to be IR. It could be anything: sociology, history, economics. We were told that a few years ago there was a scholar who was looking at ramen noodles. But the point I'm trying to say is that the China component is important. And like probably what Shubda was saying, in your statement of purpose is a good opportunity for you to highlight who in China or which department in China could probably help you in your research. And that makes a strong case to get you accepted for this fellowship. Like you have to stress out how this experience might help you in your research or your career goals. So find a department that works on a topic that you are working on, or find probably a professor whose work is closer to what you are trying to do. Highlighting that in the statement of purpose always, I think, is a good idea. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pavan. Veda or Cherry, either of you want to say anything?
I think if it's possible, Ravi, can we turn the tables a little bit, because you've gotten the perspective of all of us, or some of us who've applied and succeeded, but we have folks from the selection room here. Patricia ma'am is here, Madhavi ma'am is here, Alka ma'am is here, you are here. Perhaps either of you could also quickly tell us, why did you pick us? Like, what worked in these SOPs?
Well, I think that is the appropriate time for me to put the torchlight on Professor Patricia Oberoi. Patricia, please come forth.
Yes. Well, good evening, everyone. I just wrote in the chat box that this has been very, very inspiring. In fact, it's been a wonderful experience just to look at what everyone's been doing, how they're expressing themselves and what they've had, the experiences they've had, and all put in a very positive light. There must have been very miserable times as well. But they were not mentioned, and the whole thing has appeared to be very, very positive. I did go back in my own history to a time when I was joining Chinese studies. And I told my mother that this is, my parents, that this is what I wanted to do at the ANU. They had a Department of Oriental Studies, which had Chinese and Japanese, and then went to Indonesian, Japan, and so on. And my mother looked very distressed, and she said, but, are you going to be able to get a job after this? Didn't seem to be a very straightforward path. Well, the truth is I never did get a job in Chinese studies, but I have enjoyed myself through 60 years, I suppose. And, the whole, just to see the opportunities that have become available to you through this fellowship, and for Indian students which weren't available, they were available for Americans and British people and Scandinavians and so on, Europeans, Australians, for the last 50 years. Suddenly you're all into this. Now, at the end of my BA honours, I applied for a Commonwealth scholarship to go to Hong Kong. It was a rare thing. It was very prestigious and very competitive. And I went off to Hong Kong to study Chinese. Of course, they don't speak Mandarin Chinese there either. And it was, but I did go to the language school where I met up with people like Kishan Rana in their handsome youth. It was also the case that on that fellowship, one was really thrown in at the deep end, or sometimes I used to think thrown to the wolves, because there were many skilled and distinguished people there, but one was not actually put under their wing. You were sort of under the wing of administrators whose main interest was that you should get your scholarship and turn up every now and then and so on like that. So I did have a wonderful time in Hong Kong, but I think the exposure was perhaps nothing like you people have been able to have working within. I really was operating all by myself on a little topic of my own. I was enabled to go to Taiwan for one month in between. That was an unusual experience and very worthwhile. And I did also have enough resources to buy myself plenty of books. That was nice. But the sort of engagement with, with other scholars that you've had, I must say I'm consumed with retrospective envy, even though I had a ball of a time and learned so much. But I was not tutored in or involved in any way in a collective academic enterprise there. I was just a lone person with strange interests. And when I got to Taiwan, I found that I couldn't speak about them because that was a very restricted society at that time. And anyone interested in new literature was actually couldn't speak about it and couldn't go to the bookshops. And actually, I had to burn and destroy many of the books I secretly bought there before I left and went out through customs. So that was an unusual experience, all put down to experience, but it's so wonderful to hear you all speak and feel that one's been in a very remote way, but instrumental in encouraging it and selecting you. I mean, it's just such a pride and joy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And thank you for sharing your own experiences and how life turned out in quite different ways from what you imagined all those many years ago. I think that would be very encouraging for our young people to hear. Now, there is, you too have inspired one question from Chinmay, which is there in the chat box. Panelists, are you able to see the chat box? Okay. So anyone like to answer Chinmay on the question that he has raised. He's a PhD scholar from the Department of East Asian Studies, Delhi University. I won't read the whole question if you can see it.
I think for me, the short answer would be to borrow Nishant's line from earlier, which is I've applied, right? Just apply. Because I think that sometimes the problem is also, I mean, I don't know the specifics, Chinmay, of your question. And I'm sure if there's someone here who's closer to the work, the realm of work you're working on, we can talk more specifically. But your synopsis is always going to be evolving, right? So you're always going to be working on it. A year from now, there are going to be parts of it that you are not happy with. So my advice would be just apply. But of course, talk to a few people, work on it, make it as strong as you can, but definitely give it a shot.
Anyone else like to add to that? Add to what Veda has said?
If I could come
Yeah.
in, Ravi, for a minute.
Yes, please.
So I know this, I shouldn't be on, not a panelist that way, but I think that, it's, yeah, I would agree with Veda that, give it a shot, have some confidence in yourself and try. But also, there are people you can consult. It need not just be a conversation you are having in your own head. Am I good enough? Am I not? First of all, you have your own teachers, I would say. And, I really hope, in fact, I was going to say this, and that it's not just the potential applicants who are listening to this today, but faculty. And I know there are some of you here because I can see in the names. As a faculty member for many years, you always have your eye on students. And if you have a student who you think can, go ahead and do these things, so I think, faculty can help you. So even before you submit, write your application, you could consult your advisor or your other teachers who you feel can help you, and talk to them and see, like, what more do I need to do? Or write, don't just ask for opinions, but write something. I always tell my students, show me something in writing first, right? So write something which you think is a statement of purpose, show it to your teacher. And so that's something I would suggest, Chinmay, that, one is don't lack confidence in yourself, but secondly, take some other people into confidence and then, apply. Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Madhavi. Now, please stay on the stage, as it were, because I shall be calling on you in a minute. Snigdha, is there any other question or anything?
Nishant had raised his hand, I think.
Nishant? I didn't see that. You'd like to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with Mavi ma'am. The professors are a good repertoire of knowledge, and you should definitely consult them. But I would suggest the student who has raised the question not to reject himself, because I think there will be an extension for the application, I think, if I'm not wrong. And there's still time to apply for it. And other than this, as for your theoretical framework, I would suggest for the time being, you could also use some really good research AIs like Cite or Elicit to filter out the papers that are of your theoretical interest and start reading them. Keep a deadline that you're going to be applying this year. In that sense, you'll have a mental pressure to keep working on it and improving your synopsis. If at all you feel ready, you're at the deadline, then do submit. I don't think there is something like you can only apply once or something like that. I'm not sure. You can apply again, but that's what I would suggest. You speak to your professors. You can also take help of Cite or Elicit to filter out your papers and understand a better theoretical framework, and then keep the deadline in mind and try to work on it.
Thank you. I see Alka has raised her hand. Alka?
Yes, so very briefly, I think the general thrust, which has been brought out very well by both Madhavi and Nishant, is what I would like to stress. Look, we are not expecting, ready-made experts coming to apply for this. Okay, we all understand that you are at the very, very first stage of your research. You just begun to explore things which you have not really read too much about. So, what we are really looking for is how well have you thought about it? It may not be the perfect thing, but you should have thought about it enough to be able to give us a sense of the ideas that there are in your mind, the kind of, let's say, reading you have done for that. Again, that reading may not be completely processed or internalized in terms of the arguments, but the fact that you are aware of dominant kind of thinkers in that particular area, that you've begun to negotiate that. And essentially, we are looking for a spark. That spark which shows us that you are determined to actually uh, take this topic or this area and explore it to the best of your capability. Yes, it's really what we are assessing is your potential and your keenness for research, and it's not just that something that you've taken up because, well, that's the way to go. So please do not be nervous. I mean, even if you're not selected, the fact remains that this is a tremendous learning exercise. You come up against people who are wanting to know about what you're doing, and it may be that you may have to come up again, but don't hesitate, because if you don't come, then you'll never know what it is all about. So I would suggest, yeah, just apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Alka. Now, let me pass the mic back to Madhavi. Madhavi, this is your official closing remarks. We overshot the time a bit. So just a few minutes, if you think that would suit you.
Okay. What I had prepared, I'm going to abandon that. And because already so much has been said, but I think I'd just like to begin by, I think what Veda mentioned and many of you have mentioned, that applying for this fellowship as well as utilizing this fellowship forces you to come out of your comfort zone. Okay. Now, one can have a nice life. You can be in your university and with the teacher who has probably maybe taught you right through from MA, MPhil, PhD, and who knows you. And you can, be content with what you can access from your computer sitting here, wherever you are. But really, there is a wide world out there, and you really don't know how you can grow except if you try. So I know I can see from the questions that have been asked now and which I have heard earlier that it's not easy thing to even apply for this, because you will have a lot of self-doubt and all that. So, but I think even people who didn't get the fellowship, I don't think they would think it was a waste. The kind of interaction, the effort of putting together a good application. And I'll tell you, somebody asked about what it was like and how you were chosen and all that. But sometimes it was really close. It's just that sad sometimes that we have only 2 fellowships a year. Many of you could have got it, if we had a few more. So don't miss this opportunity. And then, as Veda said, once you are given the fellowship and you are sort of fly off to wherever, Taiwan, China, where, again, you're thrown out of your comfort zone. You don't even know how to. Reminds me like when I first went to China, and it took me a week before I could make a phone call to anybody because nobody taught me. I learned Chinese, but I didn't really know what is the polite way to talk to somebody in Chinese without seeing their face and nodding and all this, So you're thrown out of your comfort zone. But as Veda said, that that very act of adjusting to things, finding out where to get your library membership card, how to, navigate a bus, whatever, talk to somebody, and it teaches you life skills which are invaluable and which help you, to become creative and, as she said, and entrepreneurial. So I think you do come out of your coming out of your comfort zone is all what this is about, but the rewards are really tremendous. So I just want to conclude by saying that today more than ever, what China is, what China does, what China thinks is important to us, not only really important to not only us in India, but people in the region and the world. And but as I think Pavan said, the knowledge base about this country, this society, this culture is abysmally low in India. We're just too small. For a country of 1.5 billion people, nearly, it just won't do that. This is all the China scholars or the scholarship that we have. And so, when about 12 years ago, we started in ICS, put our heads together and tried to see how to plug this deficit. And we did think, I think now that we were very bold at a time when they were to think of 5 years of, scholarship and, sending people to China and Harvard and all. Oh, not Harvard. We thought China and abroad and money for this whole period. I think now we are very bold, but now I can, and see that we really have, achieved something. I'm talking about personally, but as an institute, and of course, the partnership with not just Harvard-Yenching Institute, but all the Chinese universities and the universities in Taiwan that have cooperated with us in this. I think, the best, today's panel discussion is really the sort of best testimony to it, because what I was really happy to see is not just that those of you who are in it, in the midst of it, or ending, or who have finished, you are you're not just able to explain things in ways that we cannot really, those of us who were in it at the beginning, but you have really taken ownership of the program, and I think that's the really important thing. So I would just say that at least mine, and I think Alka's and Patricia's, Ravi's, everybody else, our hope is not just that you get a PhD and you get a job, though these are very, very important, and you should, hopefully you will get these, but that you form the nucleus of China studies community in India that is capable of growing and expanding and training itself. Hopefully we will be able to train our own China scholars. And this is what I would hope that all of you who are awardees, current fellows, former fellows and future fellows, I hope this is something that would be there in your mind also. So I think with that, I would stop. And I think Snigdha is going to conclude the meeting for us. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Madhavi. With this, we come to the end of today's special panel discussion. We thank Professor Acharya, Mr. Bhutalingam, and Dr. Thampi for their valuable insight and thought-provoking perspectives. We would also like to thank our panelists, Dr. Veda Vaidyanathan, Mr. Pavan Amin, Ms. Shubda Gurung, Mr. Nishant Sharma, and Ms. Cherry Hitkari for sharing their personal journeys and the profound impact that ICS-HYI Fellowship had on their academic and professional trajectories. This discussion has truly underscored the importance of nurturing and supporting scholarship in China studies and the pivotal role that ICS-HYI multi-year doctoral fellowship in China studies plays in empowering the next generation of Indian scholars. I would like to thank the audience for the engagement and the thoughtful questions. Let us continue this important conversation beyond today. Details of the fellowship are posted on the ICS website. Have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you at future events. Thank you for joining us today.
Sorry, I just have to come in here. We were supposed to make an announcement about the fact that we will be moving the deadline for the applications. So, all of you who are thinking about, hesitating, on the verge of it, teetering, whatever, you all now have till the 15th of February to send in your applications. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.